See, this is live over here. All right. Welcome, folks. Those have the camera on. Is it showing? Okay, there we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol niyeh b'dvarei.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
Speakers are working really well here. Beautiful.
Good.
L'chaim v'bracha. Good tavach, everybody. Shavua tov, a good week. This is an important week as we prepare for Shavuos. Zman Matan Torah Seinu, the time of giving of our Torah. Every holiday has its unique kind of flavor, if you will. Pesach is Zman Cherusenu, time of our freedom. We celebrate freedom. Sukkot is Zman Simchasenu. It's the time of our rejoicing. Extra rejoicing. Torah speaks about the holiday 3 times to rejoice. Shavuos, it speaks 1 time to rejoice. The emphasis is on the giving of the Torah. That's the time of the giving of the Torah. So at the Mount Sinai, 50 days after going out of Egypt, 2.5 million people approximately were at the foot of Mount Sinai. And they received the 2 first commandments directly from God. It was too much, the revelation of godliness. They told Moses, Moses, you go get the rest. So really the last 8 commandments, he came down with the 10 commandments later, 40 days later when he went up the mountain. But what was actually said to the Jewish people was the first 2 commandments. Now Tanya explains all of that in chapter 20 through 22, chapter 20 in particular, and through 25, a deeper meaning behind it. But primarily that the first 2 commandments contain everything, contain the whole Torah. But the whole Torah was given at Mount Sinai. As we're learning in the Mimer in the morning, 7:05 in the morning, if anybody's up at that godly hour, it's a godly hour, 7:05. We learned Chassidus before davening, and we're learning how the Torah was given in general terms and in specific terms. And without going into the details there, but what's important is that the general and the specific, everything okay there?
Stephanie says she's starting to join.
Huh? Oh, so
French says she's starting to join. And then she's like, we don't see you waiting.
yeah, no. So that maybe she has the wrong link?
I just sent it to her.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she's
I
not.
was trying to see if I could see her name.
Yeah, no.
What were the first 2 commandments?
I'm the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, and there shall be no other gods before you. Right?
That sounds reasonable.
That's very
That sounds appropriate.
right.
Start with, yeah.
So, but what's important is, first of all, what the Jewish people heard collectively, they gave over to their children all the same. I remember many years ago, I read in the Montreal Gazette, some people would call that fake news. Well, this was fake news. So there was an article written about the Jews at Mount Sinai. No, she's not. Is she clicking and she's in she says she's waiting?
It says waiting. So she said, someone said, try again.
Nobody's waiting that I can see.
Yeah, no one's waiting. Maybe
she's on the wrong link.
And you sent her the link. Try the link yourself. Okay. So in that article wanted to say, the person said that, this wasn't God speaking to them. and they had some kind, that place is full of kind of different growths over there of mushrooms, and they were just all on a high, and this is what they experienced. Well, that's fake news. You know why? Because one of the things I do, one of the hats that I wear, as a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing our annual charity matching campaign, is I run a drug crisis center dealing with addiction. Oh, there's someone in the waiting room. Oh, that's you. So you have the right, yes.
I just admitted her back.
Yeah,
Okay.
you probably go out. I just can flip it up. Yeah, okay. Mount Sinai, there was no echo, so that really it wasn't good, good optics. So two people who take the same kind of drug, they'll both have two different hallucinations. 2 million people who take the same drug, they'll all hallucinate differently. But here they all came away and said that God spoke to them, and this was the message that God gave to them. And they all passed it down to their children. In any case, so the first two commandments, okay, and even if you want to say the 10 commandments that later Moses came with, but we have a fundamental tenet of Jewish faith and belief, the accuracy of the Torah, that it is all divine, every word of it, not just the first two commandments, not just the 10 commandments is the word of God, and not just all of the written word of 5 books of Moses is the word of God, but also the oral tradition is the word of God. Let's look at Maimonides and what he has to say about this.
The first two commandments were uttered.
You can see it's on the screen here. Yeah, the Torah, it's on the screen. Yeah, okay, perfect.
Sorry, we got out because of the echo.
Yeah, no, but here it's on.
on here. Yes.
Yeah, okay. And everybody else sees it, right? Okay, Maimonides.
No, we're seeing you.
Oh,
I'm seeing you. I don't
No,
know.
I see it. Now it's gone.
Yeah, I saw it too.
Saw it
I
for
saw it too.
and then it vanished.
if you're on your phone, you have. I might not know if it's on the phone.
No,
Okay,
I'm on a
there it is.
laptop.
It's there. It's there.
There now.
It's there.
Okay.
It's there.
So the ninth foundation is the principle of annulment. The Torah of Moses will never be rewritten or exchanged, and God will never give us a different Torah. We cannot add to or detract from its written word form or oral tradition. As the passage states, do not add to it and do not detract from it. So every word in the Torah is unchanging. It's eternal truth, which raises an important question. There are certain things that if you study the Talmud, you'll see that there's scientific statements that are made there, right? That science would not recognize those things today. How do we reconcile that with our faith that every word of the Torah is true? Let's take an example of this. Natural remedies that are no longer practiced. Well, let's go to the Talmud, Tractate Shabbos. Look what the Talmud, oh, okay. All right, we'll do our best over here. Okay, Talmud says, what is a yoez, or a vegetable known as a putnak? And what was the purpose? For what purpose was it eaten? To cure liver worms. With what is it eaten? With 7 white dates. If this option is not available, eat white cress. If this option is not available, place fatty meat on coals, suck on the bone while fasting, and then drink vinegar. Some maintain vinegar is bad for the liver and should be avoided. If this option is not available, scrape the dust from a thorn bush. Scrape it top to bottom rather than bottom to top, lest the worms emerge from through the mouth. At twilight, boil the dust of beer. The next day, close your nostrils and drink it. Sounds appetizing, huh? Do you know any? Did you ever go to a doctor and have a doctor prescribe this to you? No. right? These are not prescribed by doctors today. Why not? Now,
Probably work better.
huh?
It probably work better.
Yes. So, is belief in the remedies mentioned in the Talmud a fundamental tenet of Judaism, or do these sections fall outside the requirement? And why? So this is in the Talmud, right? So Maimonides says, do not ask me to reconcile anything the sages said regarding astronomy with the way things are in real life, because the mathematics, including astronomy, of those times was flawed. They did not address these matters as received traditions from the prophets, but rather as the knowledge of scholars of their generation in these fields, or as ideas they heard from the sages of their time. Okay, he has a simple solution, the Rambam, right? That's what he says. But many sages do not agree with that. They don't agree with that, right? So what we're going to learn today is a fascinating way in how we can reconcile what the Talmud says about remedies that are, seemingly that are not used today, right? And yet it's truth. How could that be? Follow the question? So some of the, as I told you, many scholars don't agree with the Rambam in saying that those remedies are not something, that they were just of the day. But many scholars believe, no, these are part of Torah and they're eternal, right? That the remedy, likewise, the scientific knowledge or medical knowledge, astronomy, sociology, mathematics, are all parts of Torah, and they're not coming from human reason, but coming from divine understanding. Let's see. Rebbeinu Bechaya.
What is that really saying?
Well, I'm going to explain. I'm going to explain. Our sacred Torah is bound in God's supernal wisdom, and all of his wisdoms are included in it. In other words, there's two ways you can know something. Down, up, down. What does that mean? How do we know things? We know it from down up. In other words, we experience over here, we test things over here, we trial and error down here, and from there we climb up a ladder in our knowledge and become more aware, right? We become more aware. We're taking it from down here. In other words, we're taking it from the human experience, we're taking it from natural science, right? So if you're putting something under the microscope, you're doing it the way you're perceiving it from here, from this perspective in the human condition. And you're trying to climb up that ladder in the human condition to greater knowledge, right? There's another way to know things. Down up, from up there. Up there meaning Torah wisdom. In other words, you can know something from the way Torah teaches it, the way revealed in Torah, right? So in other words, the healing remedies that the Talmud is speaking about are part of God's mind, because Torah is God's wisdom, his mind, if you will. And it was passed down from up there down here.
So does that mean that those remedies which are described are applicable today?
But no. But good question. Good question. We'll get there. We'll get there.
So,
Don't be jumping ahead.
No, excellent question. So the Rabbi Yosef Rosen, the Rogatchover Gaon, says, now the healing remedies mentioned in the Talmud are categorized as part of the oral Torah that it was transmitted to us from Mount Sinai. In other words, it wasn't the rabbis who got some herbs together and they figured something out and they made trial and error like we do today. So some things work, some things don't work, and the things that work today may not work. We'll find better things that work tomorrow. That's what science is, right? What was science truth 200 years ago? It's not the truth today. We have, we move forward, but that's not what happened, right? According to the Raga Chavez, he's explaining, no, it's based on divine wisdom in the Torah that they came up with these remedies. Okay?
Which means that they are perpetual. They're not.
Which means they're perpetual.
Yeah.
But then becomes the question, why are they not used then?
Yes.
That would become the question, right? Now, by the way, not only are they not used because whatever, we've tried it today and it doesn't work. Actually, in Jewish law, the Ramah in Halacha, he says clearly, many wonder about the teaching about this because experience shows that these remedies are ineffective. We must say that the nature of things has changed since Talmud Kera. This is the case with multiple subjects in the Torah. So here we have a sage that is telling us that the remedies are, in fact, extinct based on Torah, right? Experience is showing it, but the fact is, based on Torah, these are extinct. Things have changed. But how do we reconcile this with the fact that Torah is timeless, right? If it's timeless, then it should be applicable today, seemingly. How do we understand this? Question clear?
Well, it could be because there's a rejection.
Mhm.
It could be because the modern science works on a different level. And what existed thousands of years ago and what is in Talmud is something that would not be accepted today because it doesn't follow the norms of how science evolves itself.
Yeah, but we just got finished saying that was good according to Maimonides. You can say that. But you can't say that to most of the sages, don't say that. Most of the sages say, right, that the knowledge is not coming from human engagement. It's
Yeah.
coming from Torah wisdom, God's mind. So it's coming from there, right? That remedy that you just got described from the Talmud is not coming because some of the rabbis got together and they mixed things. I mean, they did that also, but they did it because they understood Torah teachings that came to this conclusion. Okay?
Yeah, but what I'm saying.
So, Abe, 1 second. If that's the case, so then Torah's teachings are eternal. So it should not change. It doesn't matter what science says. But we see that the fact is, in halacha, it's not accepted anymore as a remedy, right? So then the question is, they seem to be a contradiction. We need to reconcile the fact that it's not, if it was just human engagement down up, right? Trial and error. So they had a good trial and it went for hundreds of years, this remedy. But now, we got something better and this is not what works best, right? That worked 50%. Now we got something that works 75%. That's for argument's sake, right? That's not what happened. They didn't make trial. They weren't scientists that made trial and error. They studied Torah. From the studying of the Torah, they came up with this, right? From Torah. That's God's mind. That's God's wisdom. God's wisdom doesn't change. Yet, we don't use it anymore. And this is just one example. So how do we reconcile that? We need to make sense out of that. How is it eternal, that teaching? Okay? That's the question.
Because current mankind doesn't.
Why are you answering a question that is not answering it?
Yeah.
Because current mankind is not eternal. Science is not eternal.
Yeah.
Science changes every day.
Of course.
Every day.
That's the point because
Because
that was the norm according-
COVID proved how science changes. Give the facts you want, you'll get the science you want. Make your own facts up and
No,
right.
I'm saying that's perpetual. That I understand.
Perpetual
But
falsehood.
today, science is pushing that aside.
But that's not the point over here. They're not basing on science, though. That's the point. If they were basing it on science, so then, okay, that was the old science. Now we have the new science. But it's not based on science. That's the point. It's based on Torah.
I
not science. Torah is God's wisdom and it's eternal. If it's God's wisdom and eternal, then this law or this remedy should be applicable today as it was back in the day. That's simple.
That's
Simple.
That's
The simple
good point
question.
also, yes.
Okay? We're good? Yeah. Everybody, we're good? All right, amazing. Okay. So we need a reset, you know? They said COVID was a great reset. Right? So we need a reset over here. We need a reset. Before we answer this question, we're going to have to lay a foundation of a general point of the Torah. On the surface, and we have such a problem with this when we study Torah, I'll tell you, when we study Torah, you know, especially learning the Parsha, right? It's a narrative, it's a story. And it sounds like it's a story, and that's what it is. Okay, we know it's not just a historical story, it's got lessons that we take from it and so on, right? There's laws that we take from it, there's ethics and values we take from it. Okay. But it's a story with, you know, with teachings in it and so on, right? It's not a heavenly thing. It's an earthly engagement, right? Especially when you learn Chumash with Rashi, simple meaning of the text. It's a very, you know, I don't know, down to earth is the right word. That might not be the right word, but you would call it a profound, mystical, heavenly book. Not when you read it on the surface, right? But the truth is, that's a mistake. Its language is the language of angels and souls. Essentially, it's a heavenly book. It's about a phenomena that's happening in heaven that devolves down here on earth. It's not primarily a storyline or you know, the Jews went out of Egypt and no. It's a narrative of heaven that's reflected in a story on earth. Is that clear? The story on earth is secondary to the heavenly message that it's coming to teach us. Yeah? Is that clear? So the Torah is heavenly book that primarily addresses heavenly affairs. As the verse says in Deuteronomy, in Devarim, from the heavens, he let you hear his great voice to instruct you. And on earth, he showed you his great fire, and his words you heard from within the flames. So God's words are spoken in heaven, and they address heavenly affairs, right? And they devolve to an earthly plane. It translates down here, but primarily it's a heavenly discussion that's going on. So it reads very differently. For example, we're in the book of Numbers, and the book of, or actually, the Bamidbar is called. Book of Numbers is the second name that's given in Hebrew, Sefer Pikudim, but it's the book in the desert, right? And what do we speak about in the desert? The travels of the Jews, 42 different travels that the Jews went through while they were in the desert. Why? Why 42?
42 travels?
Different destinations, different pit stops that they went from going out of Egypt until they finally came to Israel. 42 different pit stops that they made on the way, that they traveled. They set up encampment, the Mishkan, you know, everything that they did, right? Why 42? Why 42? You know why 42? Because that's how long it took to get there. That's how we would, as regular people looking down here and looking only down like this, that's how we see it. But if we look up there, because the Torah is speaking primarily in heaven, because in heaven, the journey of life has got 42 pit stops. Life, a heavenly life, right, has 42 pit stops, right? The soul for its journey, a soul here, right? There's a soul up there, and there's a soul the way it comes into the body. It has 42 journeys it needs to go through in order to finally arrive to the Holy Land. Coming out of Egypt, the most depraved and lackluster, depraved spiritual world, to a holy environment, right? So the fact that they went through 42 down here is secondary to the real message that the soul travels, not just a narrative of the people that traveled in the desert for 40 years, but the soul in its travels goes through 42 different parts of a journey.
So these are not physical stops. They're just
Like
42.
No,
Events.
no. That again, primarily they're journeys that are in the spiritual realm, right? That's primarily what Torah is talking about, right? It devolved and reflected down here into 42 journeys that the Jewish people went through. But that's a secondary, that's only a narrative, that's only the storyline, right? It's only a story to keep your interest. But really, it's really, you need to understand that where does that story start? Not down here. The story starts up there, right? Is that clear? And we see that from the teachings because the way the words are said, I'm not going to get into the nuance right now because that itself is a whole lesson in of itself, right? That the Torah's language is speaking in such a way. It brings out that God brings you out and then your journeys. He brings you out. So in plural, he brings you out from the heavenly journey, that therefore you can have a material journey down here that will be reflected. Okay? Is that clear? Let's take another example from a mitzvah. That's a story in the Torah, right? 42 journeys. That will be actually the last Torah portion, Elamase, B'nai Israel, last Torah portion of the book of Numbers, that it will recount the 42 journeys that the Jewish people went through in the 40 years in the desert, right? Well, let's take the mitzvah of tefillin. So what do we think of tefillin? Tefillin are physical boxes with black straps, that it's a mitzvah to bind your arm, put on your head, to connect to Hashem, right? So now, although the act is in the end the most important thing, is the act of the mitzvah, but that's the way it is down here. In its root source, the primary thing of tefillin is something very different. Let's take a look at the Gemara. Gemara in Tractate Brach says, Reb Nachman, the son of Yitzchak, asked Reb Chia, the son of Advin, which passages are inscribed in the tefillin that God wears? Did you know that God wears tefillin? He wears tefillin, right? Obviously not physical tefillin, right? So Reb Chia replied, who is like you, your nation Israel, a singular nation on earth? The Holy and Blessed be He says to the Jews, you made me singular in all of existence, and I will do the same for you. You made me singular in all of existence, as it's written, Hear, O Israel, but God is our God, God is one, right? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. I will make you singular in all of existence, as it's written. Who is like you, your nation, Israel, singular nation on earth? So parchment tefillin, and ours declares the oneness of God. We have the Shema in it, right? Talmud teaches us that God also has tefillin, similar tefillin, right? But, and of course, again, God doesn't wear tefillin, physical tefillin, right? But he dons, right? Not physical tefillin, but he puts upon himself also proclaiming. And what's he proclaiming? The oneness of the Jewish people, that we're a unique people amongst all nations of the world, right? So he's focusing on our great qualities, and our tefillin focuses on God's singularity and his great qualities, right? So when the Torah commands us to bind tefillin on our arms, on our heads, what it's saying is that the tefillin, the point of the tefillin is for our awareness that we are bound up in one and bringing out the singularity in our connection to God. And through the mind and in the heart, that we are bound up in one with God, nothing else but our connection to God, right? Now, where does this come from? Why are we doing it? Because God's doing it. In other words, the mitzvah really didn't start with us. It started on heaven, with God doing the mitzvah. And like a good parent doesn't tell their child to do something, and not do it themselves. They have to be a good parent means I do what I tell my children to do, right? So God is a good father. He does what he tells his children to do. He tells us to he puts on tefillin. And actually, and it actually begins with him putting on tefillin. Because he puts on tefillin, meaning declaring that we are singularly connected and one with him and special people to him. It devolves down here that we do the same thing, but in a physical replication of that act, right? So we do it in the physical. We have to do it in the physical. So we live in the physical, right? But really, where is it coming from? God doing it in the spirit. That's its root source that devolves down here, and we do it in such a manner. So really, what is tefillin? To select, when Torah speaks about it, it's really speaking about the heavenly idea that now we have to do in the physical down here in order to make our connection a heavenly connection up there. Right? So, when I came, I think I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. I'll tell the story again. Actually, I told it this Shabbos. Chaim. Before I came to Chabad, I learned in non-Chabad yeshivas. Actually, not this Shabbos, the last Shabbos I was in California, and I met the head of the yeshiva there, the Rosh Yeshiva, Abba Shochad, and he was in Ner Yisrael in Toronto where I studied, and because of him, I studied Chassidus with him. He was there at the time, and I studied Chassidus with him, so I came to Chabad. But while I was there in this non-Chabad yeshiva, so I went to a Shabbaton with younger kids to try to bring them closer to Judaism, a similar Shabbaton that I had gone to when I was younger and first inspired. And so there was two Chabadniks there, one who I had met previously, also this is a Torontonian I'd met previously. So he says to me, you know what the difference between a Chabad and where you're studying now and on Chabad Yeshiva, he says, the way you study Torah, you're serving a book. Well, when you study Chassidus, you learn that you're serving God. I mean, when I heard that, I had a little inkling because I started studying Chassidus. I had a little inkling of what he was saying. And so it was like a dagger in my heart. I remember. What am I saying? You're studying a book. The book says, put on tefillin. You have to make sure the straps are perfect, right? That they're not turned on the opposite of the black side, right? Because then you don't fulfill the mitzvah, right? You need to have 7 over here, the 7 emotions, and everything. If it's all between your eyes, you don't fulfill the mitzvah, and I don't want to diminish at all that it needs to be done right. Absolutely. Absolutely. If the tefillin is over here, you don't get the mitzvah. You don't get connected. You don't get connected to God through the mitzvah. And the point of doing the mitzvah is to connect to God, right? So you're not if you don't do it appropriately. So I'm not diminishing at all the halacha, but the problem is it remains there, right? And then what happens? You're serving the book because the book said to do it like this and like that. Rather than you understand that really that this is through this, you're connecting to God and serving God, and that there's a spiritual component over here that we need to have an awareness of. And why do we need that awareness? Because that's really where it stems from. It's not speaking merely in the physical act of doing the mitzvah. Again, I want to make very clear, not, you don't connect. It's like, you need an antenna to be able to get the signal. If the tefillin aren't between the eyes, right? And then the black strap is, like today, someone who was in shul and he had his yarmulke and the black strap went over the yarmulke. So I told him, Sam, pick up your yarmulke, right? Because he wasn't connected. And that's crucially important. But what happens is, because the good book says that, it stays there. Until you study Chassidus, that it gives you an understanding, a deeper understanding, that there is a spiritual component in here. And it's not, and the key over here, it's not that there is an added spiritual component. That's how most people look at it, right? There's an added, deeper spiritual component. No, the spiritual component is where it began. Because it began with God putting on tefillin. There wasn't a physical component to it, right? It began in the spirit, devolved in here, and yes, we got to do it in the physical, and precisely the way it needs to be done, every mitzvah appropriately. You can't light your Shabbos candles a minute after sunset. You just can't. You just can't. Not merely, the Rishner Rebbe was a very holy man, and so when he was a young boy, he was a holy man, also a holy young boy. So when they were learning about Shabbos, when Shabbos begins, there's three stars. Well, that's when Shabbos ends, actually, 3 stars, right? So when it was sunset, and then 3 stars is when completely Shabbos is in, because that's nightfall. So they're speaking about the law. So he says, all you have to do is walk outside and look into heaven, and you'll know when Shabbos begins. That's heavenly people. They can look up. Why? Because where does Shabbos begin? Shabbos begins because the good book told us. Of course, the good book told us on how to keep Shabbos and all the details and so on. But it began as a heavenly thing that devolved over here. So the Rishner Rebbe, even as a child, he was a heavenly child, right? By the way, the Rishner Rebbe, when he studied Chumash and Rashi, he would come to the pasuk and he would ask his Rebbe a question. So, that's Rashi's question, and now he's going to answer. That's my God. Right? That's a holy, so attuned. So it began up there, and it devolves down here. Is that clear?
But these deeper meanings, let's say, how should I put it, the significance of these physical acts and the understanding, that takes a lot of learning. I mean,
Well, absolutely.
I put out tefillin every morning, but I don't see it in the sense of what you're describing.
That's why we're learning it. That's why we're learning this now, right? That we need to have a deeper, a deeper appreciation.
Yeah.
So we just gave a little glimpse of the concept of tefillin, right? We didn't go into it, right? The point over here, and what's an important point is that not to take something that we're doing in this world as a mitzvah or the study of Torah and merely look at it as a nice story that has laws, values, and ethics, and a nice story through it, right? No. That's all what it is. That's how it evolved, right? But that's all it is. It's speaking about a heavenly spiritual journey of 42 things that the soul needs to go through to have its fulfillment. Or like the mitzvah of tefillah. Okay? That clear?
Yes. It
All right.
reminds me also, Rabbi, when God
Right.
told Moses to do everything according to the model I show you on the mountain. So, like everything that is ordained to materialize on earth is already in heaven, and he's showing that model to Moses and then
Yeah.
passing it on.
Exactly. Right.
Stop it.
Mhm.
Guy up there. Mhm.
Yeah. Guy up there. A heavenly voice descended upon us.
It's come down through his mouth.
Yeah. Another example that brings out this idea is, when we went out of Egypt, and actually this week's Torah portion, right? First Rashi in the book of Numbers, right? Rashi says, "What's going on with all this counting?" He says, "Well, God is always counting the Jewish people because of His love. Because when you love something, you count it, right? Like little kids, they'll count their toys. I just saw a sikha from the Rebbe. The Rebbe said the word toys to the children when he was speaking to the children, right? That they count their toys because it's dear to them. So God counts the Jewish people. It's dear to Him, right? So when the Jews went out of Egypt, we were counted of 600,000, 600,000, 400, 604,850, if I remember. I don't know. In that case,
They didn't go-
so why is it important that we have such a count? What do we need a count for? Oh, because that's what the story tells. That's this part of the storyline, right? Again, everything that we learn. Now, when we're learning Chumash and Rashi, we can't do that because we're just learning the simple meaning, right? Although the Rebbe brings in Sichos, in the simple meaning of Rashi, that there is the depth of the wine, the secrets. Wine in Hebrew is 70 yayin, and sod is 70 is secrets, the same numeric value. So there's the wine of Rashi. But when we're studying the simple meaning to get the understanding of, the narrative, the way it is down here on the simple level. But at the same time, hidden in Rashi's words is a very much deeper understanding. So why does the Torah tell us 600,000? What does that got to do with anything? That means something to me today. That's not merely a narrative. So as Chassidus explains, because those 600,000 are an embodiment of central, of what we call um, uh, branches of souls of the Jewish people. And from the 600,000 branches, that from there emerges all souls on those branch. We all have a connection to a branch, right? We all come from that basic 600,000 souls. That from there, as a branch, will have many leaves that will bud, right, from a branch. So be many souls that will bud, and they have a commonality, a relationship between them, those souls. So actually reincarnation is the idea that you belong to this branch, and you didn't fulfill your mission, your soul now has to come back to the branch, so to speak, of all souls, Jewish souls, and a new bud comes to take on the mission that you didn't accomplish in your lifetime, right? So we need to know the number 600,000 because that's how many branches there are of different souls that emerge. Now, when you read the story, you get that? Absolutely not. Get it from Rashi? No. Could it be teased out from Rashi? Perhaps in one of the Besichos, I don't know. I'm not aware of. Whether yes or not doesn't matter, but it is teased out, right? Chassidus explains, mystical teachings explain. So where did it begin? Where did it begin? Up there, not here. Because there were 600,000 plus Jews that went out of Egypt, so now that's not truth. That's not truth. That's not absolute. It could have been 610,000. Could have been 700,000. Why 600,000? It had to be specifically this number because that's the way it is above. Now, why it's that way above? So I don't know. That's a lot of learning. Like we still go to learn, right?
Yeah.
But the awareness of that's the way it is above, so it evolved down here, and that's the way it is down here in the storyline of the Jews going out of Egypt.
What's the origins of the multiple tribes?
Jacob,
Huh?
12 sons of Jacob. But that's the way it is down here. That's not the way it is up there. That's the way. So that's one answer. The way it is down here. How did it come up? Why 12? Why didn't he have 13? Why didn't he have 11? Right? Why not 10? 10's a whole number. Why 12? Okay. Because there's a heavenly reason for that, what the 12 is, and that therefore had to devolve down here precisely this way. It's not just happened to be that way, that he happened to have 12 sons. No, he didn't happen to have 12 sons. He had specifically 12 sons. It's specifically exactly what he had to have because that's a reflection of the way it is in heaven, the division of the Jewish people. Why 12? Okay, that's already a level that I'm not certain. I'd have to look that up and to learn that what is it in heaven that there's a division of 12. I mean, one idea is because it's the number 360, and each tribe is 30 times 12 is 360, and that's the division but there's a spiritual idea up there, okay, that evolved down here, that therefore he had specifically 12 sons that specifically became the 12 tribes, right? Are you getting a taste of how absolute this is? Like, it's not just because that's the way it is. That's they didn't just have 42 journeys. They didn't just happen to have 850 head count.
Considering
Hmm?
a lot more Jews stayed behind in Egypt.
Yeah, they didn't
Right.
go-
The absolute that it only required 600,000.
So that's the way it plays out
Yeah.
in the storyline that we are tunnel vision and see down here, right? But we don't see the way it's up there. Now, what's interesting is, and this is now to come to answer our question that we have about remedies and other things in the Talmud, right? So the fact that there is when there is an alignment from down here to up there, then what's down here is reflecting what's up there, right? So the Jews, what they went through the desert, there was an alignment, even though the Jews made trouble, right? They made their trouble. They had their share of, of stuff. Yet there was an alignment that therefore they reflected down here 42 journeys the way it is up there. 600,000 plus that went out of Egypt is a reflection of the way it is up there, right? Because of the alignment that they had. They were synchronized, right? But does that mean it's always synchronized? Are we always synchronized?
Well, by the time they arrived in Israel, they were well over 1 million.
Well, 600,000 only be the men 20 to 60, right? There were 2.5 million people because the equal amount of women, more or less, let's
That
say.
600, that number represents only the males.
Males that were eligible for the army. Yeah. Yeah.
So there was more than 600,000 that left Mitzrayim.
Like 2 million plus. Yeah.
Uh,
So just take men and women 20 to 60, not under 20 and not over 60. That's 1.2 million. Take the under, if they had 2 kids each, let's say, and then you take those who are seniors, right? Senior citizens starts at 60.
Well, of course,
Early retirement.
Arrived there wasn't a reflection of the multiplication from the start, because during the 40 years, many deceased.
Anyways,
So what the
yeah, but again, we're going back to the storyline, and let's not miss the point over here. Let's make sure we got the point, right? So today we are drastically misaligned. Our earthly reality is markedly different from the heavenly reality. But this, now let us understand. Huh?
That's good news, because we're a mess down here.
Yes. This provides insight into Talmudic healing remedies. Our bodily experiences, such as eating and healing, divulge from our soul's spiritual nourishment and healing. When the Torah presents healing instructions and remedies, they are intended as heavenly remedies. This means that first and foremost, they are spiritual remedies. The plants cited in the Talmud point to spiritual entities that we cannot decipher today. After that, as an outcome of an outgrowth of their original meaning, the spiritual remedies devolve and translate into physical remedies. The Torah alludes secondarily to the lower sphere. The spiritual remedies are eternal and unchanging. They always heal and benefit spiritual entities such as angels and souls. In their initial spiritual iteration, the Talmudic remedies always provide spiritual nourishment and health for our souls. The Talmudic remedies are unchanging in this realm. When the soul's spiritual remedies devolve and translate into physical objects such as plants, they can change. When our behavior is meritorious and our lower sphere is perfectly aligned with the higher sphere, the spiritual remedies in heaven translate correctly into earthly's physical realm. The plants and roots identified in the Talmud have healing power at such times. When the lower world descends and becomes misaligned with the higher sphere, the healing power of the spiritual sphere does not translate fully into the plants and the roots of the lower sphere. Therefore, these remedies lose their ability to heal the physical body. At such times, the only application of these remedies is in the higher sphere, where the spiritual parallels of these plants continue to heal the soul. Wow. Did you get that?
no.
The Talmud, when it's speaking about how does it know that these plants heal? Because they know in their spiritual word source the way it is in the spiritual world, right? As Torah explains it in the spiritual realm, right? That's where they know it. They don't know because they tested with some plants and they made some concoction because, they made some homemade remedies. No, they know it from Torah. They know it from the wisdom of the Torah, right? Now, when we merit, when we're aligned, so when it devolves, it will devolve down here that the plant that you're using will then become a physical remedy as it is a spiritual remedy up there, right? But if we're misaligned, as we are today, very misaligned with the spirit of spirituality of God and Torah, and therefore those remedies are true up there, but don't devolve down here in a way that they will be healing for us down here. It's not because the remedies don't work, right? The remedies work. We're not able to have it work for us, right? It's interesting when, the word remedies means a lot to me. You know why? When my kids were young, we were very much into homeopathy remedies, as it's called. We saw living miracles. We could have our daughter having high fever, give her a remedy, she falls asleep, and the fever then's gone. Like,
What kind of remedy?
whatever, it's homeopathy. It's called homeopathy. I don't want to get off on that. When we used it for ourselves, it didn't work the same. And sometimes it didn't work. You know why? Kids are aligned. Adults, so much fakakt in us, so much craziness and so on, that we're disaligned, and they're much more pure, right? I don't mean their bodies are pure because they didn't go through life and get all the anxiety of life and all the troubles and tribulations and and all the toxicity that you go through and the traumas and everything of life, right? They're still pure. They're still, so that in that purity. No, but I'm talking about physically, not because even physically.
Not stress because of something else.
No, I'm saying, but I'm just giving this as a metaphor. I'm giving it as a metaphor. I'm telling you experience, a fact that happened with our experience with our kids. We gave them homeopathic, right, remedies, and I'm not going to say they worked 100%, but they worked magically with kids, and with us as adults, they help, but not nearly the same. I'm just drawing a similarity as a metaphors because they're more aligned because they didn't go through life and get, crooked, right? You get older, you become more crooked in your thinking, you become more negative, you become much more, disaligned. I'm just using that as a metaphor from personal experience, literally, right? That it's like, no question. So we are misaligned with the spiritual realm, and therefore these things don't work. Not because they essentially don't work, they do work. But if we were truly aligned, then they would work, right? It would work.
That's why one of my first professional interests was to be a child psychologist. Because I had the view, and I'm talking about when I was in high school, I used to run away to a lot of professional psychologists to get copies of their books.
Right.
Only one actually sent me. Somebody else wrote me and said to me, that's why I got out of that profession. He said to me, if you want my book, go to the store and buy it. I felt so embarrassed and offended by that. I said, I'm not going to become a child psychologist. But my belief was, if you deal with problems that kids have, they'll never grow up to be mixed up and crazy.
Right.
Like
Yep. Very true. Very true. Very true. So as we're coming to Shavuos, right? And we want to redouble our commitment to the Torah that we study. So it's not just to spend more time in study, which is, of course, we need to. We need to spend, Shavuos is a time to take upon ourselves resolve to do more. But it's not just do more study, but the quality of study, right? In the awareness of we have of what we're learning, that every word is truth. What that means, that every word is truth, means very simply, you know what that means? Every word is truth. When we're learning a Rashi, when the Rebbe is learning a Rashi, the Rebbe is taking apart every element of Rashi, knowing that Rashi is writing the truth. It's the truth because it's part of the oral tradition. When we say Torah is true, absolute truth, we don't mean the 5 books of Moses merely. And definitely we don't mean just the 10 Commandments. We mean what Rashi writes, what the Rambam writes, what the Alter Rebbe writes, Tanya, the Sikh of the Rebbe. How's it absolute truth? Because when they're learning Torah, they're learning it the way it is. I mean, they're learning it down here in the words themselves, but they see it as only as a reflection of heaven, of God's words, of God's wisdom. And they're so attuned to it that it's so real and authentically so that therefore they have such a breadth and a depth that we can never come to. We can never come to. Even if you have a genius mind, but we're not aligned. Holy people are very much aligned. So it's not enough just to be a great scholar, but the holiness means that when you're learning it, you're perceiving the heavenly message in it, not just the earthly, do's and don'ts of it, not just the, what the naked eye perceives. Now, we've got to learn it on many different levels. So you have to understand, you have to see Rashi, simple meaning, but as the Rebbe sees Rashi in the simple meaning that's meant for a 5-year-old, so meant to be taken in a literal way, right? In that literal is the secrets of the Torah, the hidden message. As the Rebbe teases it out from there, right? And brings out from there the depth of heavenly secrets that are there in Rashi's commentary. This is the way, how do you do that? So if you learn Maimonides only, you won't do it. If you learn Talmud only, you won't be able to do it, right? If you learn Chumash Rashi itself, you won't be able to do it because those teachings are on a certain level, right? As we would learn it. But when you learn Chassidus, like you come 7:05 every morning to learn Chassidus online or here, 7:05, you hear that. We're talking about now making a resolve to come. So we have some people here that come every day, actually. A few of you that come every day. 7:05 on Zoom or on,
In person.
or yeah, we have in person. We have in person, we have in Zoom, we have on WhatsApp, on Facebook. Yeah, so there's at least 3, 4, 5. Well, actually, what am I talking about? 6, 7 of you that come every day. So that gives us an insight of how Torah is speaking in a heavenly sphere, right? And of course, Tanya gives us that capability, that it's a celestial, spiritual, that even though it's speaking about something down here. So when we study Torah and we can get a sense that in every word there's absolute heaven in it, not just in the pleasure of the heavenly pleasure, but the absolute, truth of God that is given in the teachings, then we know we have for sure received the Torah. And as the previous Rebbe said, that we should receive the Torah, the simcha b'pnimius, with joy, not that it should be a burden upon us, but we should accept it joyfully and inwardly. Inwardly meaning to see the inward message, and that we take it personal, and that inward message, that it is something that, shines upon us in a way that it illuminates our lives, and that we are living its teachings. When you're learning it as a storyline, when you're learning it's about the do's and the don'ts, then you get what we say in French, farquetched. How do you translate farquetched?
French?
It's Yiddish. Here in Quebec, we speak two languages. Yiddish,
A little mixed up, a little frustrated, a little.
farquetch means squeeze. Squeeze.
English, like Hebrewish.
Farquetch means squeezed,
Yeah.
right? No, squeezed. Like like when you when you feel like you're squeezed, you got to do everything right, perfect, and you feel you're not at ease, you're not comfortable because you're always worried about doing it right and the act. Yes, but when you understand that there's a spirit behind it, so you're doing the physical act, but not in a way that you become so squeezed tight and almost robotic in order that you can be perfect. But there's a spirit to it that you sense. That there's something greater to it than just your act of what you're doing, and you sense that, and through that gives you you. And that's what a Rebbe does for us, because the Rebbe lives it, right? He lives it, but he lives it through the teachings, the teachings, he sees heaven in the teachings. And when we learn Chassidus, it gives us a glimpse that we can see heaven like he does. And that's what a Rebbe is. He's an embodiment of heaven and bringing it down to us on earth so we can get a glimpse of what that heaven looks like. Heaven on earth. All right, folks, thank you very much. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts?
The calendar.
Well, on this. I don't want to digress.
What?
I said I don't want to digress on this. Is there anything?
No, that we're finished with this, so.
No, I want to see if anybody had. We're good? Okay, amazing. Thank you, folks. Good day.